we go, top of the hour on a Friday. We come on the air with that deadly McDonald's E. coli outbreak growing big time. At least 75 people now sick. Other major chains are now pulling food off of their menus. Why it's possible that the outbreak may not only be linked to the onions in McDonald's Quarter Pounders. Plus, it's the Beehive versus the Bros in Texas tonight. VP Kamala Harris is bringing Beyonce star power to her rally as former President Trump goes on Joe Rogan's podcast. How much could it really change this neck-and-neck race less than 2 weeks until the presidential election? And then some breaking news just coming into us tonight. What we're learning about a broad hacking operation by a foreign actor targeting former President Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. And a quiet move making a big wave. Why one luxury department store is putting a ban on the word Christmas. And then it's time to play ball. How L.A. is preparing for a trifecta of sporting events this weekend, including a World Series matchup, one to watch, possibly. This is going to be a weekend like none other. Good day. I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie. And at this hour, the CDC is reporting that the number of people sickened by an E. coli outbreak linked to McDonald's has gone up. At least 75 people across 13 states now reported to have become ill, we're told. That's a big jump from yesterday when we had 49 cases reported. Most of them, a good majority anyway, are in fact in Colorado. And more cases are expected to be reported over the coming days. So far, investigators suspect that the outbreak actually started in slivered yellow onions served on some McDonald's hamburgers like the popular Quarter Pounder. One person has died. At least 22 people ended up in hospitals, and 2 of them developed life-threatening kidney conditions. The California-based food producer that supplied those onions, Taylor Farms, has now issued a massive recall. Other fast food chains like Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut are holding the onions to be safe. McDonald's now faces lawsuits from at least 2 people who say the chain's food made them sick, with many more lawsuits potentially to come. NBC's Maura Barrett has been following all of this. Maura, investigators have not yet proven the conclusion, I should say, that this was caused by the onions, right? What else are they looking at?
Tom, this is still a very active investigation going on with the CDC, the USDA, the FDA, and McDonald's. Now Taylor Farms involved as well. The FDA has narrowed its focus to those yellow onions, the slivered onions that you mentioned, but they haven't completely ruled out that the patty, the beef on the Quarter Pounder, isn't responsible as well. And so those remain off of those menus as well. But it's really important, as we've been talking about this, we saw the jump in numbers today. Those numbers are as recent as October 10th. That's when people ate at the restaurant and might have gotten ill. And so we still have this several-week gap where more reports could come in. And that's exactly what the CDC is worried about. We were able to speak with the chief of their outbreak prevention department again today. And he noted that for every case that we do have reported, they're concerned that there could be at least 26 more. I want you to hear more from that interview.
Unfortunately, sometimes it just takes a few weeks for us to understand, what the full extent is. So when we see, 75 people sick in an outbreak like this, it's really probably reflective of a couple thousand people who are actually ill.
And so the CDC has told us before that it can take as many as a few days for E. coli symptoms to present, and then up to 4 weeks for them to tie an individual illness to a larger outbreak like this, Tom.
It's a good point. People get sick and they don't necessarily think it's because of onions or McDonald's, and they never report it. There is some unusual timing here, right? Because we had Donald Trump's publicity stunt at that McDonald's in Pennsylvania where he was serving up fries. That's got some people on the internet calling this whole thing a hoax. Well, McDonald's own president has gone on TV to say it's very real, and he apologized.
Exactly, Tom. I mean, the memes with Trump ended up popping up almost immediately once we saw the reports of this outbreak. There were so many tweets kind of tying the timeline between when you saw Trump put on that apron and then these reports of E. coli pop up. But I think it's really important to note here between the McDonald's president saying it's real, the fact that all of these government agencies are investigating it, real people that have been admitted to the hospital have been very sick, one person dying, affecting as many people that are aged 10 to 88. So it's affecting this broad swath of the population, lawsuits being filed for damages. Can confirm with all of those things in tandem, it is very real. But in the age that we live in with politics right now, Tom, these hoaxes and claims of hoaxes are just sure to pop up.
Right. Maura, thank you very much. The stars are coming out in Texas this evening for VP Harris, and we're waiting to see Beyonce perform at a rally for her in Houston, right after former President Trump campaigned in Austin. He's speaking in Michigan later this evening, doing a big interview with Joe Rogan on the most popular podcast in the country. All of it as the Washington Post makes a bombshell decision today that it will not endorse either candidate, breaking with decades of precedent. The publisher says in part, quoting here, "We see it as a statement in support of our readers' ability to make up their own minds." With outrage among readers and with the paper staff already brewing in the latest major shakeup with just 11 days to go. We've got team coverage right now. Shaq Brewster is in Michigan. We begin, though, with Hallie Rafa, who is posted up by the White House for us. Hallie, talk about the significance of this move from the Washington Post not to endorse any candidate for the first time in decades. Does this create any problems for either of the campaigns or change anything for voters?
Yeah, Tom, this is significant because, as you mentioned, this is breaking from a long-standing tradition. This is the first time the Washington Post hasn't endorsed a presidential candidate in over 30 years. And the Post publisher explaining some of this, saying, quote, "We recognize that this will be read in a range of ways, including as a tacit endorsement of one candidate or as a condemnation of another, or as an abdication of responsibility. That is inevitable. We don't see it that way." And now there are reports that the Washington Post's owner, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, made the decision not to have the Post's editorial board go through with an endorsement of Kamala Harris, but rather to not endorse any candidate at all in this race. And some are saying that this is the result of intimidation by former President Trump of Bezos, because you'll remember the Washington Post endorsed President Biden back in 2020, Hillary Clinton back in 2016. And throughout his presidency and his time in office, we did see former President Trump repeatedly attack both Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post. Now, at the end of the day, these editorial board endorsements aren't necessarily big drivers of voters to the polls, but this is significant because of the message that it sends, especially considering the former president's comments about journalists, at times calling them the enemy of the people, you'll remember. So definitely a lot of reaction to this announcement today.
Right. Hallie, also, according to the New York Times latest poll, this race still a dead heat tie, couldn't really be any tighter. And now Texas, not necessarily a swing state, but it is Beyonce's home. Why is Harris campaigning there? And is her goal really to kind of reach beyond the Texas border with this Beyonce concert tonight and the endorsement?
Absolutely. And she's going to be focusing specifically on reproductive rights at this rally tonight. That is the top driver of women to the polls in this election. For one, as you mentioned, she's going to be in Texas because that is Beyonce's home state, the hometown of Houston, where this rally will be tonight. But it is also where Democrat Colin Allred is in a very critical Senate race election against Senator Ted Cruz. That's a critical race that could determine a Senate majority after this election. And it's also a state that Vice President Harris says is ground zero for these abortion bans that she blames former President Trump for. And she's going to be making the case that what is happening in Texas with this very strict abortion ban is possible in many other states if Trump were to win the White House in just a few days now. And we expect her to make that case that it doesn't just impact the families of the Texans that we know will be on stage with her at this rally. It's going to be affecting any of these Americans in these states that she argues could be at risk. And as you mentioned, with the race still neck and neck nationally and in these battlegrounds, she's aiming not just to court those pro-choice voters, but also those pro-life voters who are still supportive of reasonable exceptions to this abortion ban. Also, as we've talked about, those anti-Trump Republicans who may still not be sold on Harris yet. So a lot on her to-do list tonight, Tom.
Yep. Hallie, thank you very much. All right, let's go to NBC Shaq Brewster in Michigan, where former President Trump is set to speak in the next few hours. Shaq, Donald Trump sitting down with Joe Rogan on the most popular podcast in the country. It's a big platform for young men, for the bro vote, as they say. What's Trump's message here?
Well, Tom, it's always a little bit dangerous to guess what Donald Trump's message will be, especially in this podcast format that we know and that we've seen him appear in before, where it's looser, a lot more jokes flying, and topics can be a little bit more wide-ranging. But I think the thing to highlight about this podcast appearance is the strategy involved here. This is Donald Trump and his campaign leaning into what you see on your screen right now, that massive gender gap that is separating the candidates. Our latest NBC News poll showing that Trump having a 16-point advantage among voters who are men. Kamala Harris, the vice president, having a 14-point advantage among women voters. This is Donald Trump leaning into that gender gap that you're seeing. It's why he's sitting down with Joe Rogan. It's why you've seen him participate in several other podcasts with conservative men. You see him at MMA fights. You see rappers and athletes come up on stage with him. His campaign is being very clear that they see men as a key part of their coalition, and this is almost the end of that strategy going on Joe Rogan podcast with as many viewers and as many listeners that he has.
Shaq, you've been crisscrossing the country with the former president, and I know you've been talking to young men. Why are they gravitating towards Trump? What are you hearing from them that makes them interested in his campaign?
Yeah, Tom, I got to dig into this a little bit a couple of weeks ago when I went to an Atlanta Falcons tailgate. It's in a battleground state. I wasn't just there for the football, but when talking to a lot of the young men in particular at that tailgate, the biggest issue, no matter who they were supporting, that they came up with that they said mattered to them the most was the economy. And when you look at polling, you see that Donald Trump has an advantage on the issue of the economy, who voters feel will be better and better handle the economy. So I think that plays into it. But you also hear in one conversation that sticks out to me is one person who said there's an emotional connection there, that he may not like everything that he hears from Donald Trump, but Donald Trump has been in the culture for a long time. You had, even before him being a political candidate, a presidential candidate, you heard many rappers, for example, include Donald Trump and reference Donald Trump in their songs. I think there's a cultural element to it as well as the policy that he has that strength with.
Okay, Shaquille Brewster, who's in Michigan. Shaq, thank you very much. We have some major breaking news coming to us right now. Word that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance both have been the targets of a broad Chinese hacking operation on a U.S. telecom network. Two people familiar with the matter are telling that information to NBC News. Now, whether the attempt was successful, we really don't know, or even what the exact hackers may have been getting out of all of this. NBC's Ken Delaney has been following this story. Ken, how significant is this, and what could these hackers have actually obtained? Do we know yet?
It could be hugely significant, Tom, but we don't know if this hack was even successful. Here's the context. For several weeks, we and others have been reporting on an effort by China, an apparently successful hack of major telecommunications networks in the United States. They've burrowed in deeply. The Wall Street Journal first reported this story. There's a lot of concern within the intelligence community about what exactly they have access to, including some very sensitive information. Now, what we learned today is that as part of that hack, these Chinese hackers had tried to target the phones of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the accounts of those men. We don't know if they got in. We don't know if they secured any of their communications. We don't know if they were listening to them or monitoring them in real time. Obviously, if they were successful, that would be hugely significant. It would be a major intelligence goldmine for China or any other adversary to have the communications of a major party presidential candidate. But here's what's important to say about this, Tom. Because we're in a climate where China and other governments are interfering in the election. Nobody we've talked to believes this is part of a so-called hack and leak operation, meaning that the Chinese want to get embarrassing information on Donald Trump and put it out to influence the election. This appears more to be standard intelligence gathering. And frankly, Tom, it's the kind of thing the United States would do in China or Russia or other places, trying to target the communications of leadership to glean significant intelligence, Tom.
Any indication that they also targeted the current president and vice president?
We have not heard that. Obviously, that would be a top-tier target for the Chinese. But, you know, the current president and vice president wouldn't be using Verizon cell phones. They're using much more secure communication. So it would be kind of a different thing, Tom.
Okay. Ken, thank you very much. Ken Delaney covers justice for us. The former CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch has pleaded not guilty to more than a dozen criminal charges in just the last few hours related to allegations that he ran an international sex trafficking business. That's Mike Jeffries leaving court today out on $10 million bond. His employee, James Jacobson, pleaded not guilty a little earlier, make that a little later today as well. You'll recall that Jeffries, Jacobson, and Jeffries' partner, Matt Smith, are all facing charges or a scheme that prosecutors say ran from 2008 to 2015. They're accused of spending millions to organize so-called sex events and lure young men in using, quote, coercive, fraudulent, and deceptive tactics. The men were allegedly promised modeling opportunities or help with their careers, and if they didn't comply with what was asked of them at these sex events, then they were told it could harm their careers. That, according to the indictment. NBC's George Solis is joining us now. George, Jeffrey's partner is supposed to enter a plea. What are you hearing? What's happening there now?
Yeah, Tom, what happens now is that Jeffries must remain here in New York City, Long Island, or the Southern District of Florida, where he has a home. He remains out on that $10 million bond. And it was actually Jeffries' attorney that during this hearing entered that plea of not guilty. Now, we do know he was joined in court by his wife and son. Now, all three defendants, including Jeffries, face those 16 federal criminal charges, that one count of sex trafficking and 15 counts of interstate prostitution tied to the alleged 15 victims. Prosecutors again alleging that Jeffries and associates ran that sex trafficking scheme from 2018 to 2015, and that overlaps to some degree with Jeffries' tenure as the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch. Now, according to the indictment, the trip, these men used coercive and fraudulent deceptive tactics to get these men to attend these sex events, as you mentioned, so that these models would be promised these lucrative modeling deals. Now, for the most part, prosecutors said that these guys went along with this because they thought it would lead to a career with the agency. And we know at some of these parties, according to the indictment, they were given alcohol and drugs, muscle relaxants known as poppers. Now, for its part, Abercrombie issuing a statement saying, quote, "Our thoughts remain with those who bravely raise their voices." Keep in mind that Jeffrey stepped down as CEO of Abercrombie in 2014, so the company has had some distance from him for a while now, but some of these allegations also surfacing last year, and some of these coming to light now based on this current indictment, Tom.
You know, we've seen some high-profile figures accused of sex trafficking in recent years, not unlike the Me Too movement. Does each case seem to empower others to come forward?
Yeah, that's something that prosecutors and law enforcement in general kind of want to highlight. When you talk about some of these civil lawsuits that come in cases like the Jeffries one, they always believe that there might be more victims out there. So they always encourage, as difficult as it is for some of these victims in some of these cases, especially as the names start coming out, to come forward. We've seen it in the cases like Diddy. We've seen it in the cases of Jeffrey Epstein, R. Kelly. And again, the key messaging from prosecutors and law enforcement right now is, again, you have 15 alleged victims in this current indictment. Some of this, again, repeating itself from the 2023 allegations. So the concern is that there are more victims, and as difficult as it is, they are encouraging any victims in this case to come forward, Tom.
George Solis, thank you very much. Other news out west, the Menendez brothers are potentially one step closer to freedom after years of appealing their murder case without any success. The team's goal right now, their team's goal, is to have them home by Thanksgiving. That's what the brothers' lawyer is saying. Eric and Lyle Menendez are serving life in prison right now without the possibility of parole, but it will be a judge who decides if this is actually going to move forward. It comes after the L.A. District Attorney filed a motion late last night asking a judge to consider resentencing Eric and Lyle Menendez after spending more than 3 decades behind bars for killing their parents. Interest in the case came after a Netflix drama series and a separate documentary on the brothers. Some, including Menendez family members, are now celebrating the move, while others, even some inside the DA's office, they really don't think the brothers should be let out. NBC's Dana Griffin is out in Los Angeles with this. And Dana, there's no hearing set for this as of now. So what's the timeline look like?
Yeah, Tom, so the DA has already filed his resentencing petition with the court, and that judge has about 30 days to set a status hearing. The judge will also likely set a future hearing date where we will hear arguments for both sides, why the brothers should be released and why they should not. Now, you hear the attorney saying that they want the brothers out by Thanksgiving, but this is still a long process, and there are still other hurdles to achieve. So this resentencing unit will coordinate with the defense to set up that court date, and if the judge agrees with the DA's recommendation, the case then goes to the parole board, and Eric and Lyle will go before the parole board. They will decide if the brothers have served enough time for the crimes that they committed, which, again, 2 premeditated murders. And even the DA says that he does not agree with the method in which they chose to deal with their abuse. But here we are. And so the parole board will have to make that decision. And then there's one final step. The governor of California has to put that final stamp of approval. I reached out to his office today, and they are not saying whether or not he is going to issue a statement or where he stands quite yet on this issue. Tom?
You know, you referenced it. There is division inside the DA's office on whether they should remain in prison. They did plead guilty to premeditated murder. It's not like they were dealing with an immediate threat at that very moment, right? They planned it all out. They went down to San Diego, bought the guns. And so what is the division inside the DA's office on this?
Yeah, and I think, Tom, we're going to hear some of that when it comes out in court. And I think what the DA did yesterday was a little PR maneuvering in the sense that he got ahead of the story and already put it out during that major press conference that there was division. He said, quote, "There are people in the office that strongly believe that the Menendez brothers should stay in prison for the rest of their life, and that they do not believe that the brothers were molested." You've also got some in that office that agree with the DA's position here. So when this court hearing happens, we'll likely hear some of the arguments. You know, this case centers around the claim that the brothers were strictly after greed because they went on a spending spree after their parents were murdered. So some believe that this was an attempt to save their own lives because the brothers said that they were in fear that their parents would kill them because their family secret had gotten out. So we'll likely see what happens in the next coming days and several weeks. The DA also is up for re-election in November, and he's trailing right now, Tom. And if he is not re-elected, then a new DA will come in. But it's likely that that won't cause too much of a stir-up when it comes to this proceeding. Tom?
Okay, we'll watch it closely. Dana, thank you very much. We have more breaking news, and this is that, in fact, authorities are now telling us that stand by. We're going to get to that in just a moment. We have other news out of Israel. New Israeli airstrikes inside Gaza reported to have killed dozens this evening, cutting off communication between one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza, that according to the World Health Organization. Meanwhile, Jordan now accuses Israel of ethnically cleansing Palestinians from Gaza. Meanwhile, we are learning more of Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, killing at least 3 journalists. That according to local Lebanese officials. NBC's Matt Bradley has more from the region.
Well, the Israelis continued to pound its war fronts on both the northern front here in Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip, where a humanitarian catastrophe is worsening by the moment, particularly in the northern Gaza Strip, where the Israelis have reportedly raided a major hospital, the Kamal Adwan Hospital, and killed dozens of people in recent airstrikes. As that fight is continuing, we're also seeing bombardments here in Lebanon, particularly here in Beirut, in the southern neighborhood of Dahia, right behind me, which has been pounded for the past several weeks, ever since the Israelis expanded their attacks against Hezbollah here. Also, 3 journalists, all of them belonging to either pro-Hezbollah or pro-Iranian news outlets, were killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon, and that has raised criticism throughout the world amongst our colleagues in the journalistic community. Now, all of this is coming against the background of a renewed diplomatic push to try to resolve the conflicts in the Gaza Strip and here in Lebanon. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wound up his 11th trip to the Middle East with a trip to London, where he met with Middle Eastern leaders as well, including the Prime Minister of Lebanon and leaders of Jordan and the United Arab Emirates, all of them pleading with him to find some sort of resolutions to the multiple conflicts that have been just dividing the Middle East for the past year, ever since those October 7th attacks. Now, this is a situation that has been left unresolved, and that surprises no one, because despite the fact that the United States and other intermediaries are sending diplomats to a new round of talks starting on Sunday to try to find some sort of resolution to the conflict in the Gaza Strip and free the remaining hostages, there is no evidence so far that this 11th trip by Anthony Blinken to the Middle East has gotten anywhere further towards a resolution or solving that conflict or the one here in Lebanon than any of those previous trips have in the past.
Okay, Matt Bradley, thank you very much. Okay, now back to that breaking news I mentioned just a moment ago. A major update just into us. Kamala Harris's campaign was also apparently the target of a Chinese hacking effort that, according to a source familiar with the matter, this is coming into us just minutes after we told you Donald Trump's campaign was a target. We will have more on this at the top of the hour, but it now appears both the Harris and Trump campaigns were targeted by Chinese hackers. And more breaking news coming to us. Connecticut's governor has just declared a state of emergency because of the high fire risk there as we head into the weekend. Remember, a massive brush fire has already taken the life of one firefighter in Connecticut who was trying to contain it. Not a single drop of rain has fallen there in the last several days, and these dry conditions paired with unusually high temperatures for October really means that there's a big risk more fires could be breaking out. NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns joins me now. And Bill, explain what this means and what the risk is. You and I have been talking about dry weather conditions all week.
Yeah, this is a little unusual. Governors will issue these state of emergencies when they have big storms coming, like when we had Milton and Hurricane Helene coming. All the governors of those states did that. And the reason they do it is it helps release up funding, resources available, not just for them, but for local officials. And that's why they did this in Connecticut. They are anticipating a high fire risk this weekend. It's going to be windy, it's going to be dry, and that in case it's needed, it may not be, but in case it is needed, the resources will be available immediately. So this is kind of like a preemptive thing. This doesn't mean we're going to have horrific fires this weekend in Connecticut. It just means if they do happen, resources are available. And it is bone dry still up and down the East Coast. There's more dry air coming from the Great Lakes this weekend. When that cold front comes through, it's going to get windy on Saturday. That's what they're concerned with. Wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. And it's not just Connecticut. Any brush fires that form here, southern New England or in the mid-Atlantic region, we could have rapid fire spread with these brush fires. And there are zero rainfall expected, Tom, the next 7 days up and down the entire eastern seaboard. And we have a chance of getting close, if not breaking some all-time records. New York is going to be getting close, still about 10 days away from their record for the longest dry streak. Philadelphia, Sunday, we break that record. And as we mentioned this weekend, Tom, it's just dry, dry, dry across the entire country as the drought continues to spread and get worse.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much. Coming up from us, what we know about astronauts who had to be hospitalized after splashing back down on Earth today. Plus, why Costco is recalling some of its smoked fish. We're coming back. We're back, and the Wall Street Journal is tonight reporting that Boeing may be trying to exit the space business. The Journal says the aerospace giant is exploring the possibility of selling its space division. That, according to people familiar with the matter, but they also add that this is very early on and might not result in an actual deal. It comes during a brutal year for Boeing after its Starliner spacecraft malfunctioned, stranding 2 astronauts on the station. Our colleagues at CNBC asked CEO Kelly Ortberg just about this a couple of days ago. Here's what he said.
I think our core business of commercial aircraft and core defense products will always stay with the Boeing company, but there's probably things that we can streamline and be more efficient.
Notice he did not say space. So this all comes as Boeing's biggest union is still on strike after voting down a contract proposal, and the company reported a $6 billion quarterly loss. Now to Utah, a judge today deciding that a woman accused of killing her husband cannot have contact with her children as she awaits trial. There is Jennifer Gleedhill on the left corner of your screen. She was arrested earlier this month for allegedly shooting her husband in the head while he slept, then moving his remains to a shallow grave. The court appearance comes as her parents are in police custody as well. They're accused of taking part in covering up the murder. NBC's Maya Eglin is joining us now. And Maya, walk us through what happened in court today.
Hey, Tom. An attorney for Jennifer Glenhill spoke on her behalf beside her today at a Salt Lake City court. Her lawyer asked for this current hearing to be pushed to November 22nd, and that request was granted. But during her time in court, the state actually requested there be a no-contact order between Jennifer and her 3 young children. The state says because the children are potential witnesses, it would be inappropriate for them to communicate with their mother, who has been arrested and charged with the murder of her husband, Matthew Matthew Johnson. Their children are currently in the state's custody with temporary family placement and will be engaging in therapy soon. Tom?
All right, Maya, and what kind of evidence do police say they have against Jennifer Gledhill's parents?
Right now, it's all surrounding messages and data recovered from cell phones. Investigators actually found a conversation between Jennifer and her father, Thomas, where they agreed to have a new mattress delivered to his home. We also know that investigators discovered bloodstains under Jennifer's bed where they think this crime occurred. And witnesses say they saw Jennifer's father at his daughter's home for 5 hours on the evening of September 22nd when this all happened. There are also documents showing that Jennifer's mother, Rosalie Glenhill, had her phone completely wiped of data once it was taken into police custody. And officials say that's often a tactic used by suspects to kind of sway or change an investigation. Tom?
Okay, Maya, thank you very much for that. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about this evening. Number 1, Grammy award-winning rapper Lil Durk arrested by U.S. Marshals on a murder for hire charge in Florida. 5 other people associated with his hip-hop group have also been arrested in connection to a murder for hire plot in California. Representatives for Durk and the 5 men have not yet returned NBC's request for comment. Number 2, the Miami Dolphins say quarterback Tua Tagovailoa will start in Sunday's game against the Arizona Cardinals after clearing the league's concussion protocol. You may recall he hasn't played since week 2 after suffering at least the 3rd concussion of his career. Number 3, a smoked salmon product sold at Costco recalled over listeria concerns. It's sold under the store's Kirkland signature brand. The company behind the product says customers should not eat the salmon and can return it to Costco for a full refund. Number 4, 1 astronaut is in the hospital after an early 8-month mission on the International Space Station. NASA says he's in stable condition and under observation. As a precautionary measure, 3 other astronauts from that SpaceX crew were also in the hospital, but they have since been cleared. Now, you may recall their return had to be delayed for weeks because of bad weather. Number 5, DNA tests revealing that a skull found in the wall of an Illinois home belonged to an 18-year-old woman who died more than 150 years ago. The county coroner's office said the skull was discovered during renovations back in 1978, and it's now been matched to an Indiana woman who died after childbirth. They were able to make a family tree and even contacted a living relative. High-end luxury retailer Neiman Marcus is taking the word Christmas off the title of its iconic 98-year-old annual gift catalog. The company's Christmas book will now be called a holiday book. Neiman says it made the name change in the spirit of being more inclusive, welcoming customers of all backgrounds to celebrate the season. NBC's Brian Chung is joining us now. Brian, why is Neiman doing this?
Yeah, well, certainly after almost 100 years changing the name from the Christmas book to the holiday book, catching a lot of attention today. Neiman Marcus saying in a statement that the reason why it did it is, as you mentioned, to be inclusive as we, quote, welcome customers of all backgrounds, religions, and traditions to celebrate with us this season. The company also says that this is just designed to broaden out the lens over the shopping season, covering the period between essentially Thanksgiving and New Year's. So it's more than just December 25th. But nonetheless, it got a lot of attention after a New York Post article claiming that this action here is quietly banning Christmas, as the Post characterized it. But the company points out that the book, the actual promo itself, has 10 mentions of the word Christmas across its marketing materials. So they're saying they're not canceling Christmas here. And by the way, the book does include also imagery of Santa Claus, Rudolph, in addition to many expensive things like a pair of boots and an astrological reading that's going to cost you about $28,000. But nonetheless, catching a lot of attention today, Tom.
You know, this has become kind of a culture war thing, right? Almost a third rail when it comes to marketing. Companies have faced a lot of backlash for decisions like this. So what's the wider business strategy here? I mean, don't they risk alienating a lot of folks who don't like taking Christmas out of Christmas per se?
Yeah, and again, Neiman Marcus pushing back on even that assertion there. But what we've seen from the New York Post kind of reporting on this is that there could be internally employees that are upset about this change. Neiman Marcus telling us that, quote, we have multiple channels available for associates to give feedback, and we have not heard the concerns referenced to date. So pushing back pretty sternly on that. But this broadly, Tom, to your point, speaks to the sensitivity around DEI. We've seen this at companies like Bud Light for their marketing strategies, as well as at John Deere and Harley Davidson for their hiring and internal HR strategies. I think this kind of situation with the word Christmas has been, an issue that extends even many years past that, right? How many times have we talked about the culture war and canceling Christmas? Again, this seems to be just the latest company to catch attention. But again, the company's saying, look, we've mentioned Christmas at least 10 times in the book, Tom.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much. When we come back, how the Sun Belt's transforming the map for president and how campaigns are trying to react. Plus, an arson attack caught on camera in D.C. who neighbors say are being targeted right now. President Joe Biden has made an apology that no other American president has ever done before. No leader has done before. We'll explain that in just a few minutes. First, though, Democrats and Republicans are now turning south to the Sun Belt states in the final days of the campaign, knocking on doors and talking to voters, with Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina critical swing states that could decide who wins the election. NBC's Yumish Al-Sindoor has more.
An urgent push in the final weeks before the election.
How do you plan on voting this year?
Straight Democrat.
Okay.
I think she is so cool.
Competing door knocking from Democrats and Republicans here in North Carolina.
You seem really passionate about President Trump getting reelected.
I am, for sure.
Michigan and Pennsylvania come up time and time again as key battleground states.
Upstairs unit.
Yet the Sun Belt is emerging as critical. One Democrat-aligned group, Way to Win, says it's investing $41 million to help Vice President Harris win the Sun Belt, specifically Georgia, Arizona, and here in North Carolina. Tori Gavito, the group's president, says the left can't rely on just a few states.
We cannot play on this game of inches anymore, where we're relying on 2 to 3 states in the north to get us to the path to the White House. It's the future. The fastest growing communities are in the Sun Belt.
Those fast growing communities are transforming the map for president. Since 2008, Michigan and Pennsylvania have lost 4 electoral college votes, but these states have gained 4. Florida and Texas gained another 9. And while historically aging populations have moved south for the weather, now plenty of families looking for new opportunities are going there too. Some Republicans also think lower taxes in these states are attracting people they can win over. Andrew Covelt of Turning Point USA, a conservative group, says their ground game is focused on connecting with low propensity voters.
People that don't vote as often, like Donald Trump, they support Donald Trump. So that's a challenge. It's a opportunity, and we plan to seize it.
So we're going to go to the ones on craft.
Here in Raleigh, North Carolina, which leaned blue in 2020, Trump and GOP volunteer canvassers are hoping to boost turnout.
You were early voting this year? Okay, great.
We had 81% of Republicans turn out in 2020, and we're aiming to have that number even higher in 2024.
Polls show the race is close across the Sun Belt. Democrats hope to energize the electorate that helped Obama win here in North Carolina back in 2008, the only time a Dem candidate carried the state in the last 44 years. The black population here makes up more than 20% of the state. In Georgia, it's more than 30%. And about 3 out of 10 people in Arizona and Nevada are Hispanic. With those numbers in mind, some of Way to Win's funding is paying canvassers, like Keenan Coleman, targeting rural areas like his hometown of Wilson.
If I do have a conversation on a Tuesday, I can run into you at Walmart on Thursday, and we can have another conversation. So it brings the whole thing together.
Of course, demographics don't tell the whole story. Talking with voters can lead to surprises, like this black man who questioned Harris's race.
So you tell me, just because she's Jamaican, how does that make her black?
Am I black?
She says she's black.
I say I'm black and I'm Jamaican. So.
Right.
Despite Trump's comments to the contrary, Harris's father is black, and she identifies as black and Indian.
Well, I don't agree with no woman going out killing that unborn child.
Yes, ma'am.
There was also this anti-abortion rights voter we met who says she just can't vote for the former president.
What is it about Trump that you really don't like?
I just don't like Trump, period. He's rude and racist.
Just a few of the opinions here in the Sun Belt that could decide the next president. Yamiche Alcindor, NBC News.
Yamiche, thank you for that. NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day, and it's awfully tough to read, watch, or listen to everything. So our bureau teams have selected some highlights. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions. It's a segment we call The Local. From our Western Bureau, President Biden formally apologized today to Native Americans for a government-run boarding school system that separated children from their parents for decades.
For those who went through this period, it was too painful to speak of. For a nation, it was too shameful to acknowledge. But just because history is silent doesn't mean it didn't take place.
Mr. Biden delivered these remarks to an Indian community in Arizona, saying it is long overdue. Out of our Washington Bureau, a group of arsonists set multiple mopeds on fire in the D.C. region. You could see them bursting into flames there and the suspects all running away. Neighbors said the owners of the mopeds are delivery drivers who recently moved here from Venezuela. The fire department says it is investigating. From our Southern Bureau, a man arrested in Florida for bringing home the bacon in a big way. Police say he stole a semi-trailer with $100,000 worth of frozen bacon. Apparently, the suspect hooked his SUV to the semi and took off with it. Police records show the suspect was on probation for similar charges before this latest bacon heist. Coming up from us, should Massachusetts legalize psychedelic mushrooms? Why voters could okay them with some restrictions. We're back with our original reporting, in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching closely here. And we're looking at the battle over legalizing magic mushrooms. Now, they're already legal in Oregon and Colorado, and Massachusetts could be next. It's on the ballot this election. Advocates say it can be a powerful tool to help people struggling with their mental health. But some are worried the mushrooms can be more harmful than helpful. Here's Yasmin Vasugian.
Magic mushrooms help define the hippie generation, considered a party drug of sorts.
We're having a really fun night, actually. We're kind of going, not too hard, but pretty hard.
And a core comedic tool in whole chunks of Seth Rogen movies. Now its legalization is on the ballot in Massachusetts. The idea is to help Americans struggling with therapy-resistant depression. Question 4 includes the legalization and regulation of 5 psychedelics under licensed supervision, including authorizing individuals 21 years of age or older to grow, possess, and use a personal amount.
I wanted to show to my friends, my family.
Emily Oneshock is the grassroots campaign director supporting the initiative Yes on 4.
I think it speaks to so many people in a time when I think hope is really important to foster and develop. This is something that can help a problem that we haven't been able to resolve with our current tools.
More than 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. lives with a mental illness, and many turn to psychotherapy for help with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. But for some, that doesn't work. Oneshock, who lost her brother to gun violence and served in the Navy, says she couldn't escape her trauma until she tried psilocybin.
I had no idea just like how much I had been holding on to. And it was like the first time in like 6 years that I had this touch point of like, oh, like I feel whole and I feel safe and I feel like I bring value to this world because I had forgotten.
And she's not alone. NBC Boston spoke with Michael Bethello, another veteran.
It is like a moment of clarity when you do this, but it's something that sticks with you. It's not just a moment. The clarity stays with you.
Psilocybin-assisted therapy, or mushrooms, has been designated by the Food and Drug Administration as a breakthrough therapy for patients with major depressive disorder or treatment-resistant depression. Dr. Hannah McLean citing one small study in our conversation.
A single session of psilocybin was effective at reducing symptoms in 71% of participants. And when given a second session of psilocybin a few weeks later, 54% of participants were in remission of their major depressive symptoms.
Dr. McLean's organization, the Sound Mind Institute, is helping train and certify people to become psilocybin trainers that guide patients through the process in a safe and effective way.
We're really using these medicines to enhance therapy.
The measure would also create a board to regulate licensing of the drugs. But the president of the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society is opposed to the measure, arguing question 4 is too lax and could in fact be harmful.
So they can make people literally psychotic. When you look at the science, psilocybin has been shown to be better than nothing, placebo in some studies, but not better than standard antidepressants that we have now, which are safer. The way you do this safely and effectively is to study it, prove it, and then let doctors prescribe it appropriately and safely to people, not just let people grow it in their spare bedroom.
What do you think the uphill battle is that you face?
I think a lot of it is, like I said, the stigma.
Stigma Emily and Dr. McLean are trying to erase with legalization in Massachusetts.
And Yasmin is joining us now. Yasmin, I was up at Johns Hopkins University a few years ago when they did some of the original work on this. And they were saying this is revolutionary. And they are seeing so many patients, it literally, they describe, clears out the cobwebs in their head, and it breaks through. It breaks their depression. It can break an addiction. But there are risks, right? Because people can become psychotic and can jump out a window.
There are risks, and it's interesting that you asked that question because when I was speaking with Dr. McLean, essentially she said there is kind of a checklist you have to go through in order to qualify to use psilocybin as part of kind of your therapy. And one of them is if, in fact, you had been previously suicidal, for instance, or you had psychotic break tendencies. And for those individuals that qualify with having former psychotic breaks and or have thought about committing suicide, for instance, they did not necessarily qualify for psilocybin-assisted therapy. And by the way, there was also a study done by the University of Virginia School of Medicine in saying between the years of 2018 and 2022, calls into the U.S. Poison Control Center doubled amongst folks that were between the ages of 20 and 25 and tripled amongst folks between 13 and 19 years of age. And if you think about, Tom, right, the timeline of that, 2018 to 2022, there's 2 states in which psilocybin-assisted therapy has so far been legalized, Oregon and Colorado. In Colorado, it was 2022. In Oregon, it was 2020. So it may have been because of that. It may have been because of the destigmatization. But nonetheless, you're right. A lot of the studies have been done. And by the way, the FDA, as well as I mentioned there, are moving towards approval of this, possibly in the next 5 to 10 years.
In a clinical setting, let me just ask you this. Do you expect it's going to pass in Massachusetts? What's the read on the ground?
Of course, the activists are optimistic, but they're saying it's 50-50 at this point. But we know Massachusetts, obviously, historically more of a liberal state, so the likelihood of this passing is, at this point, fairly high.
Yeah, it is a fascinating area of research that is getting a lot of attention from around the country. Yasmin, thank you very much. Thanks. I am Tom Costello. This is NBC News Now, and the news continues right now. Okay, top of the hour, we begin with some breaking news as we have been on the air. A Chinese hacking operation targeting not just former President Trump's campaign, but also people affiliated with Vice President Harris's team, what we know at this hour. And battle of the Beehive versus the Bros in Texas. VP Kamala Harris is bringing Beyonce star power to her rally as former President Trump goes on Joe Rogan's podcast. How could that really change this neck-and-neck race? Could it? We are less than 2 weeks away from actual election day. Plus, an update on that deadly McDonald's E. coli outbreak, the fast food chain cutting ties with the facility appearing to be at the root of that outbreak as the number of people sick grows. And then some students are now going back to school for the first time since Hurricane Hallie devastated parts of North Carolina. How school is planning to deal with some of the very long-term impacts from that major disaster. And Abercrombie's ex-CEO pleading not guilty today in that sex scandal that we've been telling you about, where his case goes from here and he's out on a $10 million bond. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. I am in for Hallie Jackson. And we start with some major breaking news. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's campaigns, the targets of a broad Chinese hacking operation on a U.S. telecommunications network, that according to people familiar with this matter. Whether or not the attempts were successful or what exactly the hackers may have obtained, not clear at this hour. It comes as the stars come out in Texas tonight for VP Harris. You're getting a live look coming up at the stage where we are expecting to see Beyonce perform when she is set to give a performance at a rally for Harris in Houston. And just as former President Trump campaigns in Austin, he's speaking in Michigan later tonight and doing a big interview with Joe Rogan on the popular podcast. We've got team coverage on this. Shaquille Brewster is in Michigan with the Trump campaign. Ryan Riley will join me on the hacking attempt. We begin, though, with NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, who's in Texas. Yamiche, Texas is not necessarily a swing state. It's pretty red, but it is Beyonce's home, right? So what more do we know about the Harris campaign trying to use Beyonce as it extends its reach and its campaign?
Well, good evening, Tom. What we know is that the Harris campaign really wants to say that Texas is ground zero for what they see as dangerous consequences related to abortion bans and Roe v. Wade being overturned. And they're hoping to use Beyonce's star power as well as Willie Nelson and a number of other people here, Beyonce, of course, being the biggest name, to hammer home the point that this election is really about freedoms and it's really about the future of democracy. So we expect the vice president to come on stage and to talk about the fact that she believes Donald Trump will come and really nationalize what right now is the restrictions that we see in Texas. So she's going to say, if you're a woman in Pennsylvania or a woman in Atlanta or a woman in Wisconsin and you think that your reproductive rights might be safe from this, if Donald Trump is elected, that he will take that away from you. So that is a national argument that she's making, even though this is, of course, not a swing state. But she is hoping to help Colin Allred, who is trying to unseat Senator Ted Cruz. So she is having some politics on her mind here. But this really is about hammering that home. And also, I should tell you, she's going to be on stage with women and men who say that they face personally the consequences of these abortion bans, some of them saying that they had infections and that medical care was withheld from them because of these abortion restrictions, Tom.
Yamiche, picking up on that, I understand that she's also launching a new ad campaign against Trump on the abortion issue, right? What can you tell us about that?
That's right. Well, Vice President Harris is calling these Trump abortion bans. So she really wants to make sure that Americans don't separate Donald Trump an inch from these abortion bans. And she did release that new ad where you have woman after woman after woman saying he did this. And that's also what we've heard the vice president say. He did this. So she wants to make sure that if there are persuadable women out there, maybe some conservative women out there who maybe were even like Liz Cheney, who's been campaigning alongside her, who say, well, I was against sort of abortion and I didn't want people to have access. She's hoping that they will now reconsider that. And even with Liz Cheney saying that she has sort of really been concerned about the consequences, the medical consequences of women not getting the care that they need. Tom?
All right, Yamiche, thank you very much. Let's bring in Ryan Riley with me right now. We want to talk about this what we may be seen as a significant hack against both campaigns, and China seems to be behind it. Ryan, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, it's part of a breach of a U.S. telecommunications company, and it seems like it targeted both campaigns, including some figures on the campaign. So we're still sort of figuring this out. The FBI is taking the lead on this, but obviously with this close to the election, you know, this has been an ongoing scenario that we've seen in several elections now, where we have this outside targeting of American elections and trying to get information that could change the outcome of the election potentially.
The first report we had was that it was a Chinese attempt and they were targeting Trump and Vance. And then later, an hour later, we heard it appears that Harris and Walz were also attacked or hacked.
Yeah, so this was why you can think of that as more of a sort of looking at every campaign where we've seen some other entities, you know, your Russia that is, you know, directly allegedly trying to help Donald Trump, and then Iran apparently trying to go against Donald Trump. So that's, you know, what we've sort of seen thus far, whereas this is more of a widespread look at both campaigns.
That's interesting. So it doesn't appear necessarily that the Chinese are using this to try to influence to influence the election, but rather gather intel on all the candidates.
Exactly. Yeah, that seems based on what we know right now, that seems to be what this is. This isn't something that they're trying to get information and then, you know, publish it online necessarily, like we've seen in other cases where they're actually trying to influence how Americans vote and get information that may be, you know, detrimental to one campaign or the other. This is sort of more widespread and gathering information that can then be beneficial to China, perhaps.
Do we know, have they been listening into these phone calls or hacking the emails, or do we have any feel for that?
The feel that we have right now is that it seems to be about the number of contacts they have, but the context necessarily isn't something that we know that they have. But the contacts themselves can be very valuable, just knowing the network of people who people are talking to.
Ryan, thank you very much. Ryan Riley. All right, let's now go to NBC Shaquille Brewster in Michigan, where former President Trump is set to speak within the next hour or so. Shaq, we'll get to the trail in a minute, but let's start with the new polling from the New York Times. How is the camp from the Trump campaign really trying to capitalize on what looks like it is a dead heat now.
Yeah, there's some of the traditional campaigning that you're used to, which is the rally that we're at right now, or the media appearances. We know Donald Trump, for example, is taping a podcast with Joe Rogan today. But one thing you're seeing at a lot of these events are the pushing of early voting. You have videos encouraging people here, Republicans, to go out and vote early. You have Donald Trump earlier today saying that he feels good about what he's seeing out of the early voting numbers. I pulled up the quote. He said, "I'm not supposed to say it, but we are winning by a lot, actually," which just gives you a sense of the confidence that he and his campaign are feeling. So you see those numbers, it literally cannot be any closer, but the strategy that you're seeing is the Trump campaign pushing folks to go out and vote early.
Shaq, is the former president changing his message at all in the last few days or 10 days or so of this election?
Yeah, what we've been seeing, at least in those southern states that he's been campaigning in the past couple of days, Texas, Arizona. I was with him earlier this week in Georgia. You heard a big focus on immigration, and he's going after Vice President Kamala Harris really hard on immigration. You heard Yamiche talk about Beyonce and the fact that she's appearing with Beyonce later today. Trump using that to his advantage, saying that she's focused on woke celebrities, I'm focused on immigration on the border. So you're hearing him really dig into that, ramp up his messaging there. But when he gets to Michigan, one thing that his campaign is previewing, at least, is that the message will shift to the economy. We know, and we've heard him talk about tariffs before, for example. We heard him talk about auto workers, campaign signaling that will be one of the top messages here. But if you've seen any of these rallies before, you know he will touch on a lot of topics. The one pattern and theme that you're seeing in these recent stops, he's definitely escalating the attacks, the personal attacks against his opponents, and escalating the rhetoric when talking about some of these issues. I know you heard about the garbage comment that he was talking about and that he said repeatedly last couple of events at this point, Tom.
Yeah. Shaquille Brewster in Michigan, thank you very much. The former CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch has pleaded not guilty to more than a dozen criminal charges in just the last couple of hours related to allegations that he ran an international sex trafficking business. We're talking about Mike Jeffries leaving court today out on a $10 million bond. His employee, James Jacobson, pleaded not guilty a little later. You'll also see Jeffries and Jacobson and then Jeffries' partner, Matt Smith, all facing charges involving a scheme that prosecutors say they ran from 2008 to 2015. They're accused of spending millions to organize so-called sex events and lure young men in using, quote, coercive, fraudulent, and deceptive tactics, I should say. Those young men were allegedly promised modeling opportunities or help with their careers. According to the indictment, if the young men did not comply with what they were being asked of, then in fact they were suggested that could harm their careers. NBC's George Solis is joining me now. George, the details of what these men are accused of being involved in is really quite graphic. One of these men was only 19 at the time. So what happened in court today, and how are prosecutors expected to make their case?
Yeah, hey, Tom, yeah, quite graphic, those details in that indictment. Well, what happens now is that Jeffries must remain here in New York, Long Island, or the Southern District of Florida, where he has a home. As part of that plea agreement, Jeffrey has also had to surrender his passport and have no contact with his co-defendants. Now, he does remain out on a $10 million bond. It was actually Jeffrey's attorney today that entered that plea of not guilty. We do know he was joined in court by his wife and son. All three defendants, including Jeffrey's, face those 16 federal criminal charges, the one count of sex trafficking and 15 counts of interstate prostitution tied to 15 alleged victims. Prosecutors again alleging that Jeffries and his associates ran this sex trafficking scheme from 2008 to 2015, which overlaps with Jeffries' tenure as CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch. Now, according to the indictment, the trio used those coercive and fraudulent deceptive tactics to get men to attend these sex events where they were given drugs and alcohol in some cases. Prosecutors, and in the indictment, it alleges that they muscle relaxants known as poppers were also given to some of these men's, lubricant, Viagra, and condoms, among other items. And in one part that was particularly graphic, injections that caused the men to suffer painful physical reactions that lasted several hours, Tom. Now, keep in mind that Jeffries did step down as CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch in 2014. The company, for its part, issuing a statement in reference to all of these headlines saying, quote, "Our thoughts remain with those who have bravely raised their voices as part of this federal investigation," Tom.
Well, Jeffries, in fact, was CEO at a time when the company needed a revamp, right? And he delivered on the revamp. but it came with an awful lot of controversy on its own, and he's been gone now for quite a while.
Yeah, that's right. Keep in mind, at one point, the company was very profitable. He was seen as one of the most influential CEOs of the time. But in 2003, there was some allegations of discrimination, which Abercrombie eventually did settle for, especially as the company started to see some of those sales start to dwindle with other competitors sort of doing the same thing. So that did lead to his departure. But again, those allegations still sort of hanging out there. And now officials, attorneys, and the prosecution and really just law enforcement in general, Tom, are asking any other potential victims that may be out there, as difficult as it is, to come forward to help with this case. Tom?
Okay, George Solis, thank you very much. We have more breaking news coming in right now. McDonald's is saying it is going to stop sourcing onions from a distribution facility that's been identified as the potential source of that deadly E. coli outbreak. The California-based food producer that supplied those onions, Taylor Farms, has issued a massive recall. It comes as the CDC says at least 75 people across 13 states are reported to have become ill. That's a big jump from yesterday when just 49 cases were reported. Most of them are in Colorado, and more cases are expected to be reported over the coming days. So far, investigators suspect the outbreak started in slivered yellow onions served on some McDonald's burgers like the popular Quarter Pounder. One person has died, at least 22 people ended up in hospitals. McDonald's now faces lawsuits from at least 2 people who say the chain's food made them sick, with many more lawsuits potentially to come. NBC's Maura Barrett has been following this. And Maura, we're just now getting a new statement from McDonald's. Tell us what McDonald's had to say.
Well, the separation from the Taylor Farms Colorado Springs facility is the first firm action that we're seeing in terms of a business relationship due to this E. coli outbreak. The statement points out that we're learning from the statement that this affected 900 McDonald's restaurants, and some of those restaurants were in transportation hubs like airports. And so that kind of solves the connection between why this was spread across so many states. And then they say that they made the decision to stop sourcing their onions from that specific facility, quote, indefinitely. And so this is something that we've been waiting to see if McDonald's would take action on, but all of this comes as the investigation is still very much underway. The FDA zoning in on those onions specifically, but they have not ruled out whether or not the beef patties that are typically on the Quarter Pounders have anything to do with the outbreak as well.
All right, 75 people we know are sick. We know at least 1 death at this point. But that doesn't count people who just got sick but never reported it, right? I mean, a lot of people may feel like they just had a bad case of some GI issue, and they don't tell the CDC.
Right. I think it's a far step for a lot of people to take if they go to the doctor or aren't feeling well. But when you're talking about as many as hospitalizations as we have, these severe cases that we've had, it's really important that people who are feeling sick report it to the CDC. The strain specifically can show up in hospital tests, and so that will help tie it back to this specific outbreak. They do expect, the CDC expects to see the numbers rise. We were able to speak with the chief of their outbreak prevention center, who told us a little bit more about their calculus with that.
I think the new reports of illnesses seem to be, I think, slowing down a bit, but it is really hard to tell. I do think this number of ill people is going to grow from the 75 that we've already reported. It's hard to know how high that number is ultimately going to get.
And as we see more of those numbers reported, I think it's likely we'll see even more lawsuits as well. The lawyer who represents the clients that filed those 2 lawsuits already tells me that he now has retained 26 clients across 10 states. And so it's safe to assume, he says, that there's more lawsuits to come.
Boy, and if this food was sent to McDonald's in airports nationwide, people then getting on a plane and flying, you could have victims all over the country.
Exactly.
Maura, thank you very much. Good information there. Other news now, the Menendez brothers are potentially one step closer to freedom after years of appealing their murder case without any success. The goal right now for the brothers and for the team is to have them home by Thanksgiving. That's what the brothers' lawyer is saying. Eric and Lyle Menendez serving life in prison without the possibility of parole, but it will be a judge who decides if this is actually going to move forward for resentencing. It comes after the L.A. District Attorney filed a motion late last night asking a judge to consider resentencing Eric and Lyle Menendez after spending more than 3 decades behind bars for killing their parents. Interest in the case, as you know, came after a Netflix drama series and a separate documentary on the brothers. Some, including Menendez family members, are celebrating the move. Others, even some inside the DA's office, don't think the brothers should be released. NBC's Dana Griffin is out in Los Angeles for us. And Dana, the L.A. District Attorney, says that because the men were under 26 years old when they killed their parents, they would be eligible for parole if a judge okays it. So what's the criteria to set all that in motion?
Yeah, so right now we are waiting for that judge to set a hearing date. And then if he agrees with the DA's recommendation, then the case essentially goes to the California Parole Board. They will ultimately decide if they feel the brothers have served enough time for the crimes, murder in this case, two premeditated murders. And then finally, you've got the governor who's going to give that stamp of approval. So in his filing, the DA cited a few things about why he feels these boys or the Menendez brothers should be released. One, low risk of committing a new violent felony. They have done 300 of these resentencing, and he says only about 4 have reoffended. So he says that's a really good number when you think about the number of cases that they have resentenced. He says Eric and Lyle Menendez were under 26 years old at the time, and therefore they should not have been given life without the possibility of parole, but instead life with the possibility of parole. He talks about the childhood abuse and trauma, and he also talks about the rehabilitation and the redemption that these two brothers have both done while in prison, saying that they have both taken steps to improve their lives, knowing that there was likely never a chance that they were going to get out of prison. Tom?
And they're both in their 50s now, then, I presume. And I know that this has been a big issue. A lot of celebrities have joined in, right? We've heard from family members. We've heard from celebrities really kind of taking this cause up.
Absolutely. And one of the most high-profile celebrities is Kim Kardashian. She posted on her Instagram stories yesterday, and I'll read a part of that. Once the DA made his recommendation, she said that society's understanding of child abuse has evolved, and social media empowers us to question the systems in place. She goes on to say that this case highlights the importance of challenging decisions and seeking truth, even when guilt is not in question. And we know earlier this month, Kim K also penned a personal essay that NBC News got exclusively. And in that letter, she said that it was time for the Menendez brothers to be freed. And she played a big role even visiting the brothers during their time in prison in San Diego. So it'll be interesting to see if we see all 3 of them reunite if they are released. Tom?
Yeah. Dana Griffin, thank you very much. In a sign of hope and a step for normalcy today, thousands of students have finally returned to school in North Carolina. Buses pulled into school parking lots this morning. Students rejoined their friends and their teachers after the devastating and deadly impacts of Hurricane Hallie shut down classrooms across North Carolina for almost a month. Now, remember the scenes like this, historic flooding bringing catastrophic damage to that region and completely devastating, destroying homes, businesses, and lives. New schools are easing students back in to their routines, extending the semester and operating on a 2-hour delay through next week, allowing bus drivers and more parents time to navigate roads that still need to be cleared of the massive cleanup effort. NBC's Kathy Park is in North Carolina for us. Kathy, what are the biggest hurdles, the biggest challenges right now as schools are getting ready for these students and they're starting to come on back, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. I think it's safe to say the school year just won't be the same for these students. And really, the biggest challenge after talking to some of these students as well as the faculty is a mental health toll that a lot of them are now experiencing. And administrators are understanding that, recognizing that. And that's why they have brought in hundreds of school counselors and social workers from across the state to be here today. They'll be here for the coming days as well to help with the transition. Meanwhile, this week we had a chance to speak with a high school senior who shared his own hardships, but also the joy of reconnecting with his classmates. Take a listen.
It was difficult to hear about some of the things people are going through. I mean, we have a couple people who lost their houses. A lot of people who were displaced. But, you know, it's just great to be able to be with them instead of just hearing about things and sitting at home. Everything's not normal, but you have to, you know, think about, like, bringing things back to normal. It's going to be tough, but, you know, we're going to get through it.
And Tom, speaking of tough, it's been especially tough for high school seniors putting their college applications together, something that we didn't know going into this, but it's something that has been top of mind for a lot of these students. I was told that they've been scrambling to get internet access. It's still spotty at best in some of these locations, so these kids are going to churches, gas stations, anywhere they can just to get that Wi-Fi access and get that application done.
As I was watching your report, I was thinking exactly that. Kids getting ready for college, taking AP classes, SATs, ACTs, and to lose your home or lose pieces of your town, I mean, that's a huge distraction, right? How is the school district how are school districts planning to address that?
Yeah, Tom, it has been very distracting. Keep in mind, these kids have been away from the classroom for 3 weeks now. Today, they have a 2-hour delay. They will continue that for the next couple of days, as you mentioned earlier, to help students, faculty, bus drivers navigate the roads, and hopefully with the sun out, it'll be a little bit easier with that. They won't have early dismissal on October 31st, and they're going to extend this semester to January 24th. But really, today was a day of reuniting, reconnecting today. But really, they will make a quick pivot and get back to the academics.
Well, we wish them well. It's not easy when you've lost so much. Kathy, thank you very much. New Israeli airstrikes inside Gaza are reported to have killed dozens. As we are on the air, cutting off communication between one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. That according to the World Health Organization. Meanwhile, Jordan now accuses Israel of ethnically cleansing Palestinians from Gaza. And we're learning of more Israeli strikes in Lebanon that killed at least 3 journalists. That according to local Lebanese officials. NBC's Matt Bradley has more from the region.
Well, the Israelis continued to pound its war fronts on both the northern front here in Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip, where a humanitarian catastrophe is worsening by the moment, particularly in the northern Gaza Strip, where the Israelis have reportedly raided a major hospital, the Kamal Adwan Hospital, and killed dozens of people in recent airstrikes. As that fight is continuing, we're also seeing bombardments here in Lebanon, particularly here in Beirut, in the southern neighborhood of Dahia, right behind me, which has been pounded for the past several weeks, ever since the Israelis expanded their attacks against Hezbollah here. Also, 3 journalists, all of them belonging to either pro-Hezbollah or pro-Iranian news outlets, were killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon, and that has raised criticism throughout the world amongst our colleagues in the journalistic community. Now, all of this is coming against the background of a renewed diplomatic push to try to resolve the conflicts in the Gaza Strip and here in Lebanon. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wound up his 11th trip to the Middle East with a trip to London, where he met with Middle Eastern leaders as well, including the Prime Minister of Lebanon and leaders of Jordan and the United Arab Emirates, all of them pleading with him to find some sort of resolutions to the multiple conflicts that have been just dividing the Middle East for the past year, ever since those October 7th attacks. Now, this is a situation that has been left unresolved, and that surprises no one, because despite the fact that the United States and other intermediaries are sending diplomats to a new round of talks starting on Sunday to try to find some sort of resolution to the conflict in the Gaza Strip and free the remaining hostages, there is no evidence so far that this 11th trip by Antony Blinken to the Middle East has gotten anywhere further towards a resolution or solving that conflict or the one here in Lebanon than any of those previous trips have in the past.
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you very much. The Wall Street Journal is reporting tonight that Boeing may be trying to exit the space business. The Journal says the aerospace giant is exploring the possibility of selling its space division. That, according to people familiar with that matter. But the Journal adds it's still in an early stage and it might not happen, actually. It comes during a very brutal year for Boeing after its Starliner spacecraft malfunctioned, stranding 2 astronauts on the space station. Our colleagues at CNBC asked CEO Kelly Ortberg about this just a few days ago. Take a listen.
I think our core business of commercial aircraft and core defense products will always stay with the Boeing company, but there's probably things that we can streamline and be more efficient.
What he didn't say is the headline. He specifically said commercial aircraft and defense is core. He did not say space. This all comes as Boeing's biggest union is still on strike after voting down a contract proposal, and the company reported a $6 billion quarterly loss. Coming up from us, dozens of people are dead after heavy flooding and landslides in the Philippines. Stunning pictures coming up. Plus, why 7 people are facing cyberbullying charges in connection with the Olympics opening ceremony. We're back, and now to Utah. A judge today is deciding that a woman accused of killing her husband cannot have contact with her children as she awaits trial. There's Jennifer Gledhill there on the left corner of the screen. She was arrested earlier this month for allegedly shooting her husband in the head while he slept, then moving his remains to a shallow grave. The court appearance comes as her parents are in police custody. They're accused of taking part in covering up the murder. NBC's Maya Eaglin is joining us now. Maya, walk us through what happened in court today.
Hey, Tom. An attorney for Jennifer Gledhill spoke on her behalf beside her today at a Salt Lake City court. Her lawyer asked for this current hearing to be pushed to November 22nd, and that request was granted. But during her time in court, the state actually requested there be a no-contact order between Jennifer and her 3 young children. The state says because the children are potential witnesses, it would be inappropriate for them to communicate with their mother, who has been arrested and charged with the murder of her husband, Matthew Johnson. Their children are currently in the state's custody with temporary family placement and will be engaging in therapy soon. Tom?
All right, Maya, and what kind of evidence do police say they have against Jennifer Gledhill's parents?
Right now, it's all surrounding messages and data recovered from cell phones. Investigators actually found a conversation between Jennifer and her father, Thomas, where they agreed to have a new mattress delivered to his home. We also know that investigators discovered bloodstains under Jennifer's bed where they think this crime occurred. And witnesses say they saw Jennifer's father at his daughter's home for 5 hours on the evening of September 22nd when this all happened. There are also documents showing that Jennifer's mother, Rosalie Gledhill, had her phone completely wiped of data once it was taken into police custody. And officials say that's often a tactic used by suspects to kind of sway or change an investigation. Tom?
Okay, Maya, thank you very much for that. All right, now over to the 5 things our team thinks you might want to know about tonight. This is sad. Number 1, Grateful Dead founding member and bassist Phil Lesh has died at the age of 84. According to a post on his Instagram account, the rock legend passed peacefully while surrounded by family. Lesh is credited with redefining the sound of the bass and heavily influencing the Grateful Dead's sound. Number 2, a federal judge is blocking Virginia from removing alleged non-citizens from its voter rolls. The judge also ordered the state to reinstate more than 1,600 people who had already been taken off the list. Back in August, the governor ordered election officials to remove people who indicated on their DMV forms that they were not U.S. citizens or had left that section of the form blank. The judge ruled the order came too close to an election, and the state is already appealing. Number 3, a smoked salmon product sold at Costco recalled over listeria concerns. It's sold under the store's Kirkland Signature brand. The company behind the product says consumers should not eat the salmon and can return it to Costco for a full refund. Number 4, one astronaut is in the hospital after a nearly 8-month mission on the space station. NASA says he's in stable condition. He's under observation as a precautionary measure. 3 other astronauts from the SpaceX crew were in the hospital, but they've since been released. You may recall their return had been delayed for weeks because of bad weather. They splashed down early this morning. Number 5, DNA tests have revealed that a skull found on the wall of an Illinois woman, actually make that a wall of an Illinois home, belonged to an 18-year-old woman who died more than 150 years ago. The county coroner's office said the skull was discovered during renovations in 1978. It's now been matched to an Indiana woman who died after childbirth. They were able to make a family tree. They even contacted a living relative. Amazing. High-end luxury retailer Neiman Marcus is taking the word Christmas off the title of its iconic 98-year-old annual gift catalog. The company's Christmas book will now be called a holiday book. Now, Neiman says it made the name change in the spirit of being more inclusive, welcoming customers of all backgrounds to celebrate the season. NBC's Brian Chung is joining us now. Brian, why is Neiman doing this?
Yeah, well, certainly after almost 100 years changing the name from the Christmas book to the holiday book, catching a lot of attention today. Neiman Marcus saying in a statement that the reason why it did it is, as you mentioned, to be inclusive, as we, quote, welcome customers of all backgrounds, religions, and traditions to celebrate with us this season. The company also says that this is just designed to broaden out the lens over the shopping season, covering the period between essentially Thanksgiving and New Year's. So it's more than just December 25th. But nonetheless, it got a lot of attention after a New York Post article claiming that this action here is quietly banning Christmas, as the Post characterized it. But the company points out that the book, the actual promo itself, has 10 mentions of the word Christmas across its marketing materials. So they're saying they're not canceling Christmas here. And by the way, the book does include also imagery of Santa Claus, Rudolph, in addition to many expensive things like a pair of boots and an astrological reading that's going to cost you about $28,000. But nonetheless, catching a lot of attention today, Tom.
You know, this has become kind of a culture war thing, right? Almost a third rail when it comes to marketing. Companies have faced a lot of backlash for decisions like this. So what's the wider business strategy here? I mean, don't they risk alienating a lot of folks who don't like taking Christmas out of Christmas per se?
Yeah, and again, Neiman Marcus pushing back on even that assertion there. But what we've seen from the New York Post kind of reporting on this is that there could be internally, employees that are upset about this change. Neiman Marcus telling us that, quote, we have multiple channels available for associates to give feedback, and we have not heard the concerns referenced to date. So pushing back pretty sternly on that. But this broadly, Tom, to your point, speaks to the sensitivity around DEI. We've seen this at companies like Bud Light for their marketing strategies, as well as at John Deere and Harley Davidson for their hiring and internal HR strategies. I think this kind of situation with the word Christmas has been, an issue that extends even many years past that, right? How many times have we talked about the culture war and canceling Christmas? Again, this seems to be just the latest company to catch attention. But again, the company's saying, look, we've mentioned Christmas at least 10 times in the book, Tom.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much. When we come back, a look at our team's visit to the Sun Belt, what they found about how those communities are transforming the map for president, plus why people in Mozambique are accusing the country's ruling party of fraud. Democrats and Republicans are now turning south to the Sun Belt states in the final days of the campaign, knocking on doors and talking to voters, with Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina critical swing states that could decide who wins the election. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor has more.
An urgent push in the final weeks before the election.
How do you plan on voting this year?
Straight Democrat.
Okay.
I think she is so cool.
Competing door knocking from Democrats and Republicans here in North Carolina.
You seem really passionate about President Trump getting reelected.
I am, for sure.
Michigan and Pennsylvania come up time and time again as key battleground states.
Upstairs unit.
Yet the Sun Belt is emerging as critical. One Democrat-aligned group, Way to Win, says it's investing $41 million to help Vice President Harris win the Sun Belt, specifically Georgia, Arizona, and here in North Carolina. Tori Gavito, the group's president, says the left can't rely on just a few states.
We cannot play on this game of inches anymore, where we're relying on 2 to 3 states in the north to get us to the path to the White House. It's the future. The fastest growing communities are in the Sun Belt.
Those fast growing communities are transforming the map for president. Since 2008, Michigan and Pennsylvania have lost 4 electoral college votes, but these states have gained 4. Florida and Texas gained another 9. And while historically aging populations have moved south for the weather, now plenty of families looking for new opportunities are going there too. Some Republicans also think lower taxes in these states are attracting people they can win over. Andrew Covelt of Turning Point USA, a conservative group, says their ground game is focused on connecting with low propensity voters.
People that don't vote as often like Donald Trump, they support Donald Trump. So that's a challenge. It's a opportunity, and we plan to seize it.
So we're going to go to the ones on craft.
Here in Raleigh, North Carolina, which leaned blue in 2020, Trump and GOP volunteer canvassers are hoping to boost turnout.
You were early voting this year? Okay, great.
We had 81% of Republicans turn out in 2020, and we're aiming to have that number even higher in 2024.
Polls show the race is close across the Sun Belt. Democrats hope to energize the electorate that helped Obama win here in North Carolina back in 2008, the only time a Dem candidate carried the state in the last 44 years. The black population here makes up more than 20% of the state. In Georgia, it's more than 30%. And about 3 out of 10 people in Arizona and Nevada are Hispanic. With those numbers in mind, some of Way to Win's funding is paying canvassers, like Keenan Coleman, targeting rural areas like his hometown of Wilson.
If I do have a conversation on a Tuesday, I can run into you at Walmart on Thursday, and we can have another conversation. So it brings the whole thing together.
Of course, demographics don't tell the whole story. Talking with voters can lead to surprises, like this black man who questioned Harris's race.
So you tell me, just because she's Jamaican, how does that make her black?
Am I black?
Because she says she's black.
I say I'm black and I'm Jamaican. So.
Right.
Despite Trump's comments to the contrary, Harris's father is black, and she identifies as black and Indian.
Well, I don't agree with no woman going out killing that unborn child.
Yes, ma'am.
There was also this anti-abortion rights voter we met who says she just can't vote for the former president. What is it about Trump that you really don't like?
I just don't like Trump, period. He's rude and racist.
Just a few of the opinions here in the Sun Belt that could decide the next president. Yemi Shalsendor, NBC News.
Okay, Yamish, thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories each day, and it can be very tough to read, watch, or listen to them all. So our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's what they're looking at and watching. We call this segment The Global. Out of the Philippines, a severe tropical storm triggering major floods and landslides. Take a look at people there almost submerged in the floodwaters, stuck on top of houses. Dozens of people have died. The Civil Defense Office says more than 160,000 people have had to shelter in evacuation centers. In Mozambique, the capital city is erupting in protests over the country's presidential election. Demonstrators flooded streets, accused the ruling party of fraud after its candidate won. The opposition has called for nationwide protests, insisting, in fact, that it is the real winner. The ruling party has been in power for more than 5 decades. Out of France, 7 people charged in connection with cyberbullying that targeted the artistic director of the Paris Olympics opening ceremony. You probably saw the show with guillotines and drag queens. Criticism of it escalated very quickly online, attacking the director with homophobic slurs and death threats. And all those alleged commenters could face jail time and heavy fines in France. Coming up, why magic mushrooms are dividing voters in Massachusetts. That's next in our original. We're back with our original reporting, in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching closely here. And we're looking at the battle over legalizing magic mushrooms. Now, they're already legal in Oregon and Colorado, and Massachusetts could be next. It's on the ballot this election. Advocates say it can be a powerful tool to help people struggling with their mental health. But some are worried the mushrooms can be more harmful than helpful. Here's Yasmin Vasugian.
Magic mushrooms help define the hippie generation, considered a party drug of sorts.
We're having a really fun night, actually. We're kind of going, not too hard, but pretty hard.
And a core comedic tool in whole chunks of Seth Rogen movies. Now its legalization is on the ballot in Massachusetts. The idea is to help Americans struggling with therapy-resistant depression. Question 4 includes the legalization and regulation of 5 psychedelics under licensed supervision, including authorizing individuals 21 years of age or older to grow, possess, and use a personal amount.
I wanted to show to my friends, my family.
Emily One-Shock is the grassroots campaign director supporting the initiative Yes on 4.
I think it speaks to so many people in a time when I think hope is really important to foster and develop. This is something that can help a problem that we haven't been able to resolve with our current tools.
More than 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. lives with a mental illness, and many turn to psychotherapy for help with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. But for some, that doesn't work. One-Shock, who lost her brother to gun violence and served in the Navy, says she couldn't escape her trauma until she tried psilocybin.
I had no idea just like how much I had been holding on to. And it was like the first time in like 6 years that I had this touch point of like, oh, like I feel whole and I feel safe and I feel like I bring value to this world because I I had forgotten.
And she's not alone. NBC Boston spoke with Michael Bathello, another veteran.
It is like a moment of clarity when you do this, but it's something that sticks with you. It's not just a moment. The clarity stays with you.
Psilocybin-assisted therapy, or mushrooms, has been designated by the Food and Drug Administration as a breakthrough therapy for patients with major depressive disorder or treatment-resistant depression. Dr. Hannah McLean citing one small study in our conversation.
A single session of psilocybin was effective at reducing symptoms in 71% of participants. And when given a second session of psilocybin a few weeks later, 54% of participants were in remission of their major depressive symptoms.
Dr. McLean's organization, the Sound Mind Institute, is helping train and certify people to become psilocybin trainers that guide patients through the process in a safe and effective way.
We're really using these medicines to enhance therapy.
The measure would also create a board to regulate licensing of the drugs. But the president of the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society is opposed to the measure, arguing Question 4 is too lax and could in fact be harmful.
So they can make people literally psychotic. When you look at the science, psilocybin has been shown to be better than nothing, placebo in some studies, but not better than standard antidepressants that we have now, which are safer. The way you do this safely and effectively is to study it, prove it, and then let doctors prescribe it appropriately and safely to people, not just let people grow it in their spare bedroom.
What do you think the uphill battle is that you face?
I think a lot of it is, like I said, the stigma.
Stigma Emily and Dr. McLean are trying to erase with legalization in Massachusetts.
And Yasmin is joining us now. Yasmin, I was up at Johns Hopkins University a few years ago when they did some of the original work on this. And they were saying this is revolutionary. And they are seeing so many patients, it literally, they describe, clears out the cobwebs in their head, and it breaks through. It breaks their depression. It can break an addiction. But there are risks, right? Because people can become psychotic and can jump out a window.
There are risks, and it's interesting that you asked that question because when I was speaking with Dr. McLean, essentially she said there is kind of a checklist you have to go through in order to qualify to use psilocybin as part of kind of your therapy, and one of them is if, in fact, you had been previously suicidal, for instance, or you had psychotic break tendencies. And for those individuals that qualify with having former psychotic breaks and or have thought about committing suicide, for instance, they did not necessarily qualify for psilocybin-assisted therapy. And by the way, there was also a study done by the University of Virginia School of Medicine in saying between the years of 2018 and 2022, calls into the U.S. Poison Control Center doubled amongst folks that were between the ages of 20 and 25 and tripled amongst folks between 13 and 19 years of age. And if you think about, Tom, right, the timeline of that, 2018 to 2022, there's two states in which psilocybin-assisted therapy has so far been legalized, Oregon and Colorado. In Colorado, it was 2022. In Oregon, it was 2020. So it may have been because of that. It may have been because of the destigmatization. But nonetheless, you're right. A lot of the studies have been done. And by the way, the FDA, as well as I mentioned there, are moving towards approval of this, possibly in the next 5 to 10 years.
In a clinical setting, let me just ask you this. Do you expect it's going to pass in Massachusetts? What's the read on the ground?
Of course, the activists are optimistic, but they're saying it's 50-50 at this point. But we know Massachusetts, obviously, historically more of a liberal state, so the likelihood of this passing is, at this point, fairly high.
Yeah, it is a fascinating area of research that is getting a lot of attention from around the country. Yasmin, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.